The sky was dark and heavy with smoke. The ground shook under the heavy steps of machines and soldiers. The planet, called Korra, was no longer peaceful. It had become a place of war. Two groups fought for control: humans and the Varkan, an alien race with strong bodies and sharp eyes. Remo, a young human soldier, moved carefully through the broken land. His uniform was dusty, and his boots left deep marks in the cracked soil. He held his rifle tightly, but his heart was heavier. The battle had been fierce, louder and longer than any he had faced before. Explosions lit up the night, and the sound of gunfire was everywhere. The air smelled of burnt metal and dust. Remo's squad had fought hard. Slowly, they were being pushed back. Orders came through the radio: retreat. Fall back to base. The humans were losing ground. Remo's squad began to move back, one step at a time. Behind them, the Varkan warriors pressed forward. The Varkan were tall and strong, with green skin and sharp claws. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark. They fought with power and skill, but Remo noticed something else: fear. As the humans retreated, Remo looked around. The battlefield was full of broken machines, fallen soldiers, and silence between bursts of gunfire. Suddenly, something caught his eye. A figure lay alone near a crumbled wall. It was a Varkan warrior, badly hurt and unable to move. Most of Remo's squad didn't see her. Those who did chose to ignore her. To them, she was just the enemy, a part of the fight that had ended. But Remo stopped. He looked at the alien warrior. She was breathing, slow and shallow. Her green skin was covered in dust and blood. Her eyes were open, and she looked straight at him, filled with pain but also something else: hope. Should we leave her? One soldier whispered behind him, but Remo didn't answer. His mind was busy with questions. Why was she still here? Why wasn't she taken away by her own people? And why did he feel a strange need to help her? The squad kept moving. Remo stayed for a moment longer, then quietly knelt beside the wounded alien. He checked her pulse. It was weak but steady. Carefully, he spoke softly, "I'm not going to hurt you." The Varkan warrior tried to speak but only made a low sound. Her strength was fading fast. Remo knew that if he left, she would die alone on this battlefield. His squad was far ahead now. The war was not over, but their part in this fight was done. Remo had a choice: follow them or stay and help. He looked around quickly. The night was dark, and the sounds of battle were moving away. No one was watching him closely. Remo made his decision. Gently, he moved under her arms and lifted her. The alien warrior was heavier than he expected, but he did not struggle. She didn't fight or resist. She trusted him in a way he could not explain. As he carried her, Remo's mind raced. This was dangerous. If the others found out, they might call him a traitor. But his heart told him this was the right thing to do. The journey back to the base was long and quiet. Remo kept low, hiding in the shadows. Every sound made his heart beat faster. He hoped no one would see him with the enemy. The alien warrior's breathing grew steadier as they moved. Remo whispered her name, though he did not know it yet. "Hold on. I'll keep you safe." For the first time since the battle began, the silence between gunfire felt less like fear and more like hope. Remo moved quickly but carefully through the dark forest near the battlefield. The trees were tall and thick, their leaves blocking the moonlight. The air was cool and smelled of earth and wet grass. Each step was quiet, but Remo's heart beat loudly in his chest. He was carrying the wounded alien warrior, and every second felt like a risk. He glanced down at her. The warrior's face was pale, but her sharp eyes slowly followed his movements. Remo didn't know her name yet, but he thought of her as Selka. It was a name that came to his mind strong and simple. Selka's breathing was steady but shallow. She was still weak. Behind them, the sounds of the retreat faded. The human soldiers were far away now, safe inside their base. Remo hoped no one would notice he had not returned with them. He didn't know what would happen if they did. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. Remo! Where are you? It was one of his squad mates, a man named Tilo. He sounded worried. Remo froze. He had to think fast. Just checking the rear lines, Remo called back softly. I'm coming now. Don't take too long. The officers want everyone back. Remo nodded, though Tilo could not see him. On my way. After Tilo's voice disappeared, Remo kept moving. He couldn't leave Selka behind. Not now. Not after he saw the pain in her eyes. Something inside him told him that she wasn't just an enemy. She was a being who deserved help, no matter where she came from. The path to the base was not easy. The forest was thick, and the ground was uneven. Remo had to step carefully to avoid making noise. Selka's weight made every step harder, but he didn't complain. He was determined. Finally, he reached the edge of the forest. In the distance, the lights of the human base shone bright. Remo knew this was his chance. He had to find a safe place for Selka, where no one would hurt her or turn her away. He slipped through the gates quietly. The base was busy, soldiers moving quickly, machines humming, and radios crackling. Remo's heart pounded again. If anyone saw him carrying an alien, they would stop him immediately. He found a small, empty room near the medical center. The door was old and slightly open. Remo pushed it gently and entered. Inside, there were beds and medical supplies, but no doctors or nurses. Here, Remo said softly, lowering Selka onto one of the beds. Selka winced but did not speak. Remo sat beside her and looked at the wounds on her arm and leg. They were deep and ugly, but not impossible to heal. Remo searched the room for bandages and water. He cleaned her wounds as best as he could. The silence was calm, broken only by Selka's soft breathing. Hours passed. Selka's eyes closed for a moment, then opened again. She looked at Remo with a strange mix of gratitude and caution. Remo smiled gently. You're safe here. She tried to speak but only made a soft sound. I don't understand your language, Remo said. But I want to help. Selka reached out weakly and touched Remo's hand. Her skin was rough but warm. For the first time, Remo felt a real connection to the alien warrior. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Remo's heart stopped. A soldier appeared, looking surprised to see Selka. What is she doing here? The soldier asked sharply. Remo stood quickly. She is hurt. I found her on the battlefield. She needs help. The soldier frowned. You can't keep an enemy prisoner here. You have orders. Remo shook his head. She's not just an enemy. She's hurt and alone. I won't leave her. The soldier looked angry but said nothing more. He left the room, closing the door behind him. Remo knew the soldier would report this. Time was running out. He looked at Selka. She was weak, but her eyes held a quiet strength. We have to be careful, Remo whispered. I'll protect you. That night, Remo stayed by Selka's side. He thought about the war, the fighting, and the pain on both sides. He realized that not all enemies were the same. Some just wanted to live, to protect their homes and families just like humans. In the darkness, a new hope grew inside Remo. Maybe, just maybe, the war could end. Maybe they could find a way to understand each other. But first, he had to keep Selka safe. And that would not be easy. The sun rose slowly over the human base on Korra, casting soft orange light on the quiet buildings and tents. Inside a small medical room, Remo watched Selka carefully. She had slept more peacefully than the night before, and her breathing was steady now. Her wounds were beginning to heal, but the pain still showed in her eyes. Remo sat beside her bed, his mind full of questions. He wanted to understand who she was and why the war had brought her here, wounded and alone. But there was one problem: they did not speak the same language. Selka looked at Remo, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other. There was no anger, no fear, just quiet curiosity. It was the first time Remo felt something other than war between them. "Can you tell me your name?" Remo asked gently, though he knew she might not understand. Selka's eyes widened slightly, and then she nodded. "Selka," she said, her voice soft but strong. Remo smiled. "I'm Remo." The two names were simple, but they carried weight. Two warriors from different worlds, now sharing a small room far from the battlefield. Over the next few days, Remo visited Selka often. He brought clean bandages, food, and water. Slowly, he taught her a few words in their language, and she showed him signs from hers. It was slow, but a connection was growing. Selka used her hands to draw pictures on the wall with a piece of charcoal. She drew her home, a place with tall mountains and wide rivers. She showed Remo her people's symbols, signs of strength, honor, and family. Remo listened carefully, fascinated by the stories the pictures told. One afternoon, as Remo was helping Selka drink water, she suddenly stopped and pointed to her chest. "Varkan," she said. Remo nodded. "You're a Varkan." Selka's eyes shone with pride. "Warrior." Remo felt respect for her grow even more. Selka was not just a soldier, she was a protector of her people. But the war was not far away. Outside the base, soldiers trained and prepared for the next fight. Radios buzzed with new orders. The leaders did not know about Selka, and if they found out, she would be taken away or worse. Remo worried. He wanted to keep her safe, but he was only one man. Could he protect her from the fears and anger of others? One day, the base's doctor, a calm woman named Lina, entered the room unexpectedly. Her eyes widened when she saw Selka. "What is this?" Lina asked, her voice low but firm. Remo stood quickly. "I found her on the battlefield. She's badly hurt. I'm helping her recover." Lina studied Selka carefully. "She's alien. We can't keep her here without orders. This could be dangerous for you and the base." Remo felt his chest tighten. "She's not a threat. She's just hurt." Lina shook her head. "War is war. You must be careful." The warning stayed with Remo. He knew Lina was right. He couldn't keep Selka hidden forever. That night, Remo sat by Selka's side again. He thought about the battle, the enemies on both sides, and the cost of war. He realized that sometimes, the greatest courage was not fighting but understanding. Selka looked at him and reached out to hold his hand. It was a simple gesture, but it meant a lot. They were no longer just soldier and enemy, they were friends. The next day, Selka stood slowly. Her wounds had healed enough for her to move. Remo helped her walk outside, into the fresh air and bright sunlight. They stayed hidden in a quiet corner of the base, away from the busy soldiers. Selka showed Remo how to make a small fire with dry leaves and sticks. Remo taught her how to use a simple radio, hoping to find a way to communicate with her people. One afternoon, while sitting by the fire, Selka made a sound that caught Remo's attention. It was a soft song, different from anything he had heard before. Her voice was gentle but filled with emotion, a song of home, of hope, and of peace. Remo listened, feeling a new kind of strength in her song. It was a reminder that behind the war, behind the fighting, there was still life, still beauty. Days turned into weeks. Selka grew stronger, and their bond grew deeper. Remo learned more about her world, her people, and her fight. She told him, without words, about the losses she had seen, the homes destroyed, and the dreams shattered by war. Remo felt a fire inside him, a fire to change things, to end the fighting, and to find a way for humans and Varkan to live together in peace. But he knew it would not be easy. There were many who would not understand, who would see Selka as only an enemy. Still, Remo was ready. For Selka, for their people, and for a future where no one would be left behind on the battlefield. The days passed slowly in the hidden corner of the base where Remo and Selka stayed. Outside, the sounds of war and machines never stopped. But inside that small room and its quiet surroundings, something different was growing, a bond between two beings from different worlds. Remo watched Selka as she practiced standing and moving. Her strength was returning, and she was learning quickly. Her green skin still showed scars, but her eyes were bright with determination. One morning, Remo brought her a small gift, a simple necklace made from a piece of metal and a bright stone he had found near the base. It was not much, but it was a sign of friendship. Selka looked at the necklace with surprise. Slowly, she touched it, then smiled a small, honest smile. She wore it around her neck, and Remo felt warmth inside. It was the first time they shared something so personal. The two of them sat outside under a tree, away from the noise. Selka tried to speak, using the few words she had learned. "Home," she said softly, pointing to the sky. Remo nodded. "I want to see your home someday." Selka looked away for a moment, sadness in her eyes. Then she looked back and placed her hand over Remo's. "I fight for peace," she said simply. Remo understood. The war was not just about winning, it was about protecting the people they loved. For Selka, her family and her land were everything. That night, Remo told Selka about his own family, a small village on Earth, far from the war. He spoke of quiet mornings, green fields, and the laughter of children. Selka listened closely, her eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and longing. Their conversations were slow and simple, but they meant a lot. Each new word was a step toward understanding. One day, while exploring the base quietly, Selka found a small garden hidden behind a building. It was full of strange plants and flowers, colors she had never seen before. She touched the petals gently and smiled. Remo watched her and thought about how much beauty could still exist even in a place torn by war. But not everyone was happy about Selka's presence. Some soldiers whispered and stared when they saw Remo near the medical room. They talked about trust and danger. Remo tried to ignore the voices. He knew he was doing the right thing, but doubts sometimes crept in. Was he betraying his people? Or was he opening a door to something better? One evening, as Remo and Selka sat by the fire, a sudden noise startled them. The door to their hiding place opened, and two soldiers stepped inside. "Remo," one of them shouted. "You need to come with us. The officers want to see you." Selka tensed, ready to stand. Remo quickly stood in front of her. "It's okay," he said calmly. "I will come. But please, don't hurt her." The soldiers nodded but looked unsure. Remo followed them through the base, leaving Selka behind for the first time in weeks. In the command tent, the officers waited, their faces serious. "Remo," the commander said, "we know you've been hiding something. An enemy. We want to know why." Remo took a deep breath. "She is hurt. I am helping her recover. She is not just an enemy. She is a warrior, like me. We both want peace." The officers exchanged looks. One of them spoke slowly. "This is dangerous. If others find out, it could cause panic. But we will consider your words." Remo knew it was not enough. He needed to do more than talk. When he returned to the room, Selka was waiting. She looked worried but did not speak. Remo sat beside her and took her hand. "We will find a way," he promised. Together. Days later, Selka and Remo trained quietly. Selka showed Remo how to move silently, how to listen to the world around them. Remo taught her about human weapons and tactics. They were learning from each other, building trust and respect. One evening, as they watched the stars, Selka said something that surprised Remo. "Friend," she said simply. Remo smiled. "Friend. For the first time, the word felt real. The war was still raging outside, but inside that quiet corner, two warriors were no longer enemies. They were allies. They were friends. And their bond would be the beginning of something new. The peaceful moments Remo and Selka shared were growing rare. The base was buzzing with new orders and preparations. War was coming again. Remo knew he could not keep Selka hidden forever. One afternoon, while Remo was gathering supplies near the outer edge of the base, he overheard a conversation that chilled him. Two officers spoke in low voices, their faces serious. "The humans and Varkan are too busy fighting each other," one said. "Meanwhile, the Zoran Corporation profits from the war. They sell weapons and supplies to both sides, growing richer while thousands suffer." The other officer nodded. "We need to find proof and stop them. But it won't be easy." Remo's heart pounded. Zoran Corporation, he had heard the name before. They were a powerful group, far from the battlefield, making money by keeping the war alive. He hurried back to the hidden room where Selka waited. "Selka," Remo whispered, "there is someone making this war worse. They want to keep fighting to get rich." Selka's eyes darkened. "Greed kills." Remo nodded. "We have to stop them. Together." The next days were filled with secret plans. Selka and Remo moved carefully, gathering small pieces of information from soldiers and workers around the base. They spoke quietly, sharing what they learned. One night, while exploring an old supply building, Selka found a hidden room filled with strange devices and papers. They looked like plans for new weapons and contracts with Zoran Corporation. "This is it," Remo said, his voice low. "Prove." But they were not alone. From the shadows, a guard stepped forward, shining a light on them. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Selka stepped in front of Remo, her posture strong despite her recent wounds. "We are stopping the war," she said firmly. The guard hesitated, then lowered his weapon. I don't agree with this war either," he admitted. "But what can one soldier do?" Remo smiled. "More than you think." The guard, whose name was Jairo, joined their secret group. Together, they planned to bring the truth to both human and Varkan leaders. But it was dangerous. If Zoran Corporation learned of their plans, they would come after them. One evening, as Remo and Selka studied stolen documents, an alarm sounded. "Intruder alert," a voice echoed through the base. Lights flashed red. Soldiers rushed past the room. Remo grabbed Selka's arm. "We have to go. Now." They ran through dark corridors, avoiding soldiers who were trying to capture them. At the base's edge, Jairo waited with a small ship. "This way," he urged. Inside the ship, Selka looked at Remo. "We cannot fight alone." Remo nodded. "We need allies. People who want peace." The ship rose quickly, leaving the base behind. As they flew toward a distant outpost, Remo felt hope and fear mix inside him. They were no longer just two survivors. They were part of something bigger, a fight not just against enemies on the battlefield, but against those who used war for their own gain. The hidden threat was real. But Remo and Selka were ready to face it together. And they would not stop until peace was possible. The small ship hummed quietly as it flew through the sky. Remo looked out the window, watching the stars blur past. Beside him, Selka sat, her eyes steady and focused. Jairo sat at the controls, navigating toward the distant outpost where they hoped to find allies. The war on Korra was not just between humans and Varkan. It was also a war against those who wanted to keep the fighting alive, powerful groups like the Zoran Corporation. Remo knew they could not win alone. At the outpost, a group of soldiers waited. They were tired of war, just like Remo and Selka. Their leader, a strong woman named Mara, stepped forward. "We heard your message," Mara said firmly. "We want peace too." Remo felt relief. We have proof that Zoran Corporation is selling weapons to both sides. They don't care who wins. They only want money. Mara nodded. We need to show this to the leaders. But they will not listen easily. Selka stepped forward. We must unite. Humans and Varkan together. The idea was new, but it gave hope. For the first time, soldiers from both sides stood together, sharing stories of loss and dreams of peace. Over the next days, they worked hard to prepare. Remo, Selka, and Mara planned to deliver the proof to the leaders of both races. They knew it would be dangerous. There would be people who wanted to stop them. One night, as they rested, Selka spoke softly. I never thought I would trust a human. Remo smiled. Neither did I. But we are stronger together. Their bond was more than friendship, it was a symbol of what could be. The journey to the leader's city was long and full of danger. They traveled by land and air, avoiding patrols and spying eyes. At times, they faced storms and rough terrain. But their hope pushed them forward. Finally, they reached the city, a place where humans and Varkan rarely met. It was large and busy, full of noise and lights. Remo felt nervous as they entered. In a grand hall, the leaders sat on high chairs. The room was cold and full of silence as Remo stepped forward. He held out the papers and devices with the proof. This war is not what it seems, Remo said clearly. Zoran Corporation profits from your pain. If we don't stop them, this war will never end. The leaders looked at each other, then at the proof. Some faces showed shock. Others, anger. Selka stepped forward. We are not enemies. We can choose peace. A human leader spoke first. How can we trust this? The war has lasted for years. A Varkan leader added, why should we believe that peace is possible? Mara spoke next. Because we stand here together, humans and Varkan who want the same thing. We have lost too much already. There was silence again, but this time it was softer. The leaders whispered among themselves. Finally, the oldest leader stood. We will investigate these claims. But peace will take time. Remo nodded. We are ready to work for it. As they left the hall, Selka looked at Remo. This is only the start. Remo smiled. But it is a good start. Outside, the sun set over the city. The sky was painted with colors of hope. For the first time in a long time, the future looked different. It was no longer just war and pain. It was a chance for healing. A chance for a new beginning. The city was quiet in the early morning light. Remo, Selka, and Mara stood together on a balcony overlooking the great hall where the leaders had met. The air was cool, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh earth and hope. Months had passed since their meeting. The leaders had listened and started small talks for peace. It was not easy. Old wounds and deep fears still lingered, but for the first time, people dared to dream of a different future. Remo looked at Selka. She was stronger now, her wounds healed, her spirit shining bright. She was no longer just the wounded alien warrior he had found in the forest. She was a symbol of hope and friendship. I never thought this day would come, Remo said quietly. Selka smiled. Neither did I. But here we are. Mara joined them, her face serious but calm. The road ahead is long. We have many challenges. Remo nodded. But we have started. We have to keep moving forward. In the city, humans and Varkan began to meet more often. Markets opened with goods from both worlds. Children from both sides played together in parks. Old soldiers who once fought each other now shared stories and meals. The war was not over, but the fighting had slowed. Leaders on both sides worked to end battles and build trust. One day, as Remo walked through the market, he saw Selka speaking with a group of children, humans and Varkan alike. She showed them how to make small crafts and told stories of her home. Remo smiled. This was the future they had fought for, not a world of enemies, but a world of friends. But peace was fragile. Some people still opposed it, afraid of change. There were threats and dangers, but Remo, Selka, and their allies stood strong. Together, they faced every challenge with courage. One evening, Remo and Selka sat under the stars outside the city. The sky was clear, the stars bright. "Do you miss your home?" Remo asked softly. Selka looked up. "Yes. But now, I have a new home." Remo reached out and took her hand. "And you will never be alone." The stars above seemed to shine brighter, as if they too were watching this new bond between two worlds. Remo thought of the long journey from the battlefield, where he found a wounded enemy, to this moment, where they stood as friends and hoped for many. It had not been easy, but it had been worth every step. Selka squeezed his hand gently. "War can end. Peace can live." Remo nodded. "Because we chose it." As the night deepened, two warriors from different worlds sat together, no longer enemies, but partners in a new dawn. Their story was proof that even in the darkest times, kindness and courage could change everything. And with that hope, the future began.